a nice ring to it. Galpin's steps sloshed through the muck. Rain had ruined the old trail. His boots slid with every step, and it was difficult to see his way in the dark. The path would be full of ruts once it dried. Such was life this far south, but Galpin would take it over the cold any day of the year. Rain soaked him to the core. His shirt twisted and clung to him. His socks squished in his muddy boots. Water rolled down his matted hair and dripped off his nose. A few times he slipped and nearly fell on his bottom. Only by using his shovel as a crutch did Galpin prevent himself from falling in the mud. At least the rain was letting up to a drizzle. The moon shined through the parting clouds, lighting Galpin's muddy path. He wicked his forehead with his palm, wiping away the water from his bangs. His calloused hands rummaged through his rucksack. There. Galpin held the ring overhead. Moonlight glinted off the pure gold. He went to place it on his finger, but it was too small. Perhaps it was a woman's ring. Perhaps hands that worked a shovel were too thick for the ring. No matter. The ring slid onto his pinky. His hand outstretched to the sky and covered half the moon. He could sell it and live at an inn for 3 moons. But he rather liked the ring. Perhaps he'd keep it. Either way, it was a good find.
In every person exists the capacity for light and darkness,
called a voice. Galpin spun around but could see no one.
We are made of truth and lies,
the voice called from everywhere and nowhere. Galpin twirled until he was dizzy. There was no one around. No law-abiding, right-minded person would be out at this hour, especially in rain like this.
Courage and cowardice,
the voice continued. Galpin raised his shirt collar to his ears, tucked his hands into his pockets, and marched toward his home.
Grace and indecency,
said the voice. Galpin half wondered if the voice was inside his head. He did his best to ignore it. Thoughts of his cozy sheets and his straw bed came to mind.
No matter how dark the night.
Clouds returned to cover the moon. It was near perfect darkness. Galpin could no longer see his hand in front of his face.
When all hope is lost.
A lightning bolt lit the sky and thunder cracked through the silence. The rain came down harder than ever. Galpin broke into a run, or at least as close to a run as he could manage in the muddy, mucky trail. His eyes squinted and he held a hand by his forehead to shield from the torrent of rain.
The circle has no beginning or end.
Lightning cracked again, illuminating. An apparition appeared before him, all white in a wedding dress, a bouquet of flowers clasped in hands at her waist. She radiated beauty. The vision took a step closer. She appeared older than a second ago. Perhaps Galpin had not made out her image as clearly in the rain. She took another step toward him. Galpin froze with fear. No. She had to be a decade older than he imagined. With each step closer, she aged by years. She transformed from a beautiful maiden to an old crone. Her skin sagged and then began to fall off in clumps. She opened her mouth.
It is eternal,
The woman's jaw fell off her mouth. Galpin turned and ran. He fell every few footsteps. The path had become a river. He couldn't see anything, but he thought he could retrace his steps. Galpin slipped and fell in the muck. He looked behind him. The lady floated towards. Her skin had fallen off. She was little more than a skeleton in a dress. Galpin scurried to his feet, then veered off the path and into the garden. He grabbed a tree. Too thick. He found another. Cedar. No. The third tree was a maple, planted earlier this season. Galpin slammed his shovel into the ground, then slung the muck. He worked like a rabbit fleeing from a fox. In his case, the ever-approaching woman was the fox, and he was the rabbit. But it was too slow. Galpin turned to the woman and threw his shovel at her. It soared through the air and then harmlessly threw her and landed on the ground behind her. She continued floating toward him. His terror intensified. Galpin turned away from the skeleton woman. In the pouring rain, he clawed with his fingers through the mud. He was half his height into the ground within seconds, for this earth had been freshly dug by none other than himself a mere hour ago.
Do you have the ring?
The woman hovered over his shoulder. Galpin gasped in horror, but he did not stop digging. His hand struck something. Flesh, cold and stiff. Fingers. Galpin slid the ring off his pinky. With shaky hands, he clasped the wrist of the corpse, then slid the ring on its finger. The rain ceased, and the clouds parted. The moonlight returned to give him some semblance of vision. He spun in all directions, but the skeleton woman was nowhere to be seen. The hand still stuck out from the dirt. Galpin gathered his wits, then his shovel. He filled in the hole and covered the hand in the process. Covered in mud and without the ring, he wandered home in the midnight moonlight.